Tonight's story is called The Little Match Girl, a cozy tale of finding home, a bedtime story made just for you. Hello, dear dreamer. You've done enough today. Let your breath slow. Let your body soften. Nothing is required of you now. This is a story of small lights in deep winter, of warmth born from a single flame, of kindness that arrives when it's most needed, and of a home found at last. So inhale the day and exhale the weight of it. Settle in. The fire is waiting. Let us begin. Winter had settled early that year, not with thunder or spectacle, but with a quiet persistence, the kind of cold that didn't need to announce itself, because it always arrived the same way, patiently, thoroughly, like a hand laid over a mouth of the world. The little house stood at the edge of the village, leaning slightly, as if it too had grown tired of holding itself upright. Boards had split long ago, and straw had been pushed into the cracks wherever wind liked to slip through. In the thin afternoon light, those pale gold strands caught the sun for a few minutes before dusk, glowing like small secrets. The girl noticed them every day, not because anyone pointed them out, but because she had learned to look for what was still good. Inside, a low fire breathed in the hearth. It didn't roar, and it didn't dance. It simply endured, offering warmth the way a tired person offers a smile, honestly and without promise. The girl sat close enough to feel its kindness on her cheeks. She wore a blanket that wasn't really a blanket anymore, mended and patched so many times that the original cloth had disappeared into the stitching. Still, she smoothed it over her knees as if it were fine wool, and traced the seams with one finger. The crooked threads made wandering paths, roads, rivers. She liked the idea that something broken could still be made useful, and even beautiful, if someone cared enough to mend it. A small pot of soup hung over the fire. There wasn't much in it, a few vegetables, a pinch of herbs, water stretched thin as hope. The steam rose anyway, soft and silver, and the smell filled the room with the faintest comfort. The girl breathed it in slowly. She learned not to wait for abundance. She took what was offered, even when it came in whispers. Her mother moved around the table, folding laundry with her hands that never seemed to rest. The cloth was worn. Everything in the house was worn. Her mother's shoulders, too, looked worn, as though the world had pressed down on them for so long that they'd forgotten how to lift. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't gentle. She was simply gone somewhere inside herself, where worry lived like a permanent resident. Her father sat on a stool by the wall, repairing a chair that didn't need much fixing. He worked slowly, carefully, winding a strip of leather around one leg, tightening it with the concentration of someone trying to hold the world together and whatever thread he had left. When he finished, he nodded to himself, satisfied, and didn't look up. They fed the girl when there was food. They kept a roof over her head, even if the roof sighed in the wind. They did what poor people often do when life becomes nothing but survival. They kept moving. But the girl had noticed something else too, a kind of absence that couldn't be blamed on hunger alone. No one lifted her chin to meet her eyes. No one asked her what she'd seen in the fire that day. No one called her close just to feel her small body breathing against theirs. Love didn't cost anything, and a hand on her hair would have been free. A soft word would have been free. And still, those small gifts almost never came. Once, long ago, before there was a grandmother who had vanished from this world, the girl had known what it felt like to be looked at as if it mattered. Her grandmother used to cup her face between her warm palms and say her name as though it was something precious. That memory lived inside her, like a little candle she kept hidden from the world. So, the girl learned to be her own company. She learned to listen to the way the house spoke, the tick of the cooling ash, the whisper of straw on the walls, the far-off bark of a dog outside. She learned to find beauty in the grain of a wooden bowl, in the swirl of soot along the hearthstone, in the way the last light of the day turned dust into glitter. Some children are taught to notice wonder. She had to teach herself. And because she did, her inner world grew large, larger than the leaning house, larger than the empty pot, larger than the silence between her parents. That afternoon, as the sky dimmed and the fire sank lower, her mother set a bundle on the table, matches tied with twine. "You'll take these," her mother said, and her voice sounded like someone setting down a burden she'd carried too long. The girl nodded. She didn't ask why she had to go again. She already knew. In a house like this, children didn't belong to childhood. They belonged to need. Her father reached for the bundle and tightened the knot. Over, under, pull. His hands were careful with the twine, as if the neatness of the knot might keep the rest of the world from unraveling. "Try to sell them," he said. Not sharply, not angrily, just flat, like a fact carved into stone. The girl held the matches for a moment, feeling the warmth they borrowed from the room. Smooth wood, bright tips, tiny sleeping flames. She wondered, not for the first time, what it felt like to be meant for warmth, to be wanted because you could make a dark place brighter. She wrapped her thin blanket around her shoulders. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She smoothed the edge once more, the way her grandmother used to smooth her hair, and walked to the door. She paused at the threshold. Behind her, the fire, the soup, the two tired figures who had given her life, but not quite the softness that makes you feel safe. Ahead of her, the cold street, the village lights, the long walk into the evening. For a heartbeat she waited, not for permission, but for the smallest sign that someone would miss her. A word, a touch. Her name spoken gently. Nothing came. So she lifted the latch herself, and the wind slid like an uninvited guest. Cold struck her face. Cold struck her feet. The earth outside was hard, and it bit back through the thinness of her steps. She pulled her blanket tighter and stepped into the snow. The first flakes drifted down, light as feathers. She tilted her face up and let them land on her tongue, cold, clean, and real. She swallowed and started walking towards the glow of the village. The village lay a little downhill from the house, as though the world itself knew that warmth gathered where people gathered. The girl walked carefully along the frozen path, her bare feet learning every stone, every ridge, every hidden patch of ice. The cold stung, but she didn't hurry. Hurrying made the ache sharper. Slow steps let her breathe around it. Snow fell in soft spirals. Lanterns swung on the iron hooks outside shops and taverns, their yellow light trembling in the wind. Somewhere, a bell rang the hour, thin and distant, like a voice calling from another life. She held the bundle of matches against her chest. They were warm from the house. She liked imagining they still carried a little bit of the fire with them, as if the hearth had lent her a small piece of its heart to take on the road. The first street was busy enough. Boots crunched, horses snorted. People moved quickly, heads tucked into collars, hands buried into pockets. They brushed past her without even seeing her. A small girl with a blanket and a bundle of matches didn't belong into their evening. She was part of the scenery, like the drifting snow. She stopped near a doorway and lifted one match in her hand, just enough for the passerby to see. "Matches?" she asked quietly. A man shook his head without breaking stride. A woman glanced down, then away. A child stared, wide-eyed, before being pulled along by a gloved hand. The girl didn't feel angry. Not exactly. She learned long ago that the need did not make people kinder. Need made them look away, because they had their own hungers to tend. So she kept walking. She liked this part best, the wandering, the watching, the way other lives revealed themselves in small and guarded moments. A baker pulled loaves from an oven, the scent curling into the street like invisible ribbons. She paused, breathed deeply, and imagined the crackle of crust beneath her teeth. A woman leaned from an upstairs window, calling a name into the night. Love carried on the wind in a single syllable. Somewhere behind a door, laughter burst out, bright and sudden, before being swallowed again. She watched it all, collecting impressions the way other children collected toys. At the end of the next street, she saw a row of houses dressed for the season. Evergreen branches framed the doors. Small candles glowed in the windows. Stars cut from paper spun slowly in the warmth draft inside. And then she saw the house. Not grand, not large, just alive. Firelight moved behind the curtains, steady and confident. A Christmas tree stood near the window. Its candles burned with patient golden flames. A table had been set for supper. Plates, cups, a jug of water. Simple things, but arranged with care. And inside, a man and a woman. They sat across from each other, not eating, not speaking. The man held a cup with his hands, warming his fingers. The woman watched the fire, her face soft and thoughtful. They were well dressed, and their house was full, and their table was ready. And yet, there was a quiet in that room that felt familiar to the girl. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of something missing. She stepped closer to the window, careful not to let her breath fog the glass too much. She didn't want to be seen, only to see. The woman turned slightly, saying something the girl couldn't hear. The man nodded. Their eyes met. They smiled, small and tired. They looked kind, but they also looked lonely. The girl didn't know why that mattered to her. She only knew she wanted to understand how a house could be so warm and still feel empty. How people could have everything she did not and still carry a longing as deep as her own. A gust of wind pushed against her back, reminding her of the cold. She pulled the blanket closer and stepped away from the window. "Matches?" she asked again, lifting her hand as a couple passed. They shook their heads and hurried on. The street slowly emptied. Lanterns flickered lower. Doors closed. Curtains were drawn. One by one, the windows of the village turned from glowing gold to dull gray. All except the house with the firelit tree. Its light stayed steady, waiting, holding. The girl didn't know it yet, but something had already shifted. A thread had been tied between her and that window, thin as twine, strong as fate. She tucked the bundle of matches beneath her blanket and continued walking deeper into the evening. The snow fell a little thicker. The cold sharpened. The night grew quieter as the girl walked. The kind of quiet that comes not from peace, but from people shutting their doors and turning inward. Shops closed their shutters. Taverns pulled curtains tight. Even the stray dogs curled into corners and stopped roaming. Snow gathered along the edges of the road. The girl's footprints filled almost as soon as she had made them, as if the world were gently erasing her path. She slowed, not because she was tired of walking, but because she knew the hour was growing late. Soon, there would be no one left to sell the matches to, at all. She opened her hand and counted the bundle. All still there. None sold. The truth settled into her chest with the weight heavier than the cold. She could go home. She knew what waited there. The low fire, the thin soup, the two tired faces. She knew the way her father's jaw would tighten when he saw the untouched bundle. She knew her mother would sigh, not loudly, but in that quiet way that meant disappointment had already moved in for the night. No one would strike her. No one would scream. Their poverty had worn them past that kind of passion. But there would be no comfort either. No understanding. No hand on her head saying, "You tried. That's enough." She stopped walking. The village lay behind her now, its last lights dimming under falling snow. Ahead was only the narrow path leading back to the leaning house and the waiting silence. The girl stood in the middle of the road, breath rising in small clouds, blanket drawn tight, matches pressed to her chest. She didn't want to go home. Not because she hated it, but because she knew that once she crossed that threshold again, the small, quiet hope she carried inside herself would shrink a little more. She'd felt it happen before. A little less wonder, a little less color in the world. And she couldn't bear to lose that. So she turned away from the path home and walked towards the village, though most of its doors were now closed to her. The wind followed, sharp and insistent. Snow slipped beneath her blanket. Her toes burned, and they began to fade into the numbness. She passed darkened window shops, past shuttered inns, past houses where families gathered around tables she could no longer see. At last, she reached the narrow space between two buildings, one leaning slightly over to the other, forming a crooked shelter from the worst of the wind. She stepped inside the little hollow and sank down onto the cold ground. The stone beneath her drew warmth from her body immediately. She tucked her legs close, wrapping her blanket around them as tightly as she could. Still, the cold seeped in. She curled forward, arms around her knees, forehead resting against the fabric. Her breath slowed, her thoughts softened. Snow fell steadily, dusting her hair and shoulders like quiet feathers. Her hands began to ache, fingers stiffening, skin turning pale. She thought of the fire in the hearth at home, not its warmth, only its shape, how it moved, how it spoke without words. Then she thought of the house with the tree and the glowing windows, the couple inside, their quiet faces, their table set for a meal that had already grown cold. She wondered if they were eating now, or if they too sat in silence, listening to the wind. She wondered if they ever felt the way she did, full of longing with nowhere to pour it. A tremor ran through her body. She pressed her hands tighter around her legs, tried to breathe warmth into her fingers. The air leaving her mouth looked like smoke, vanishing as soon as it appeared. She could not sit here all night. She knew that. Even a child knew that a cold like this was dangerous, that sleep could come quietly and carry her someplace from which there was no waking. But she was so tired. Tired of walking, tired of waiting, tired of hoping for kindness that never arrived. Her fingers brushed against the bundle of matches beneath her blanket. Wood, twine, tiny red tips. Warmth, just waiting to be born. The girl hesitated. Matches were meant to be sold, not burned for comfort. That was the rule that kept hunger away for one more day, the rule that made her useful in a house that needed usefulness more than love. But her hands were shaking now, her breath thin, her toes had gone numb, and a thought, quiet but steady, rose in her mind. If no one will give me warmth, I will make it myself. She loosened the twine with stiff fingers, pulled one match free, held it carefully between her thumb and forefinger, and in the hollow between the two buildings, with the snow falling thick and the wind whispering through the night, the girl prepared to strike her first small flame. And the village light slowly slipped behind her, leaving only darkness ahead, and a small warmth beating quietly against her chest. The girl held the match carefully, as if it were a fragile creature that might startle if she moved too quickly. Her fingers were stiff, but she managed to strike it against the stone wall. A sharp whisper, a spark, a bloom of flame. Warmth kissed her skin instantly. She cupped her hands around the tiny fire, protecting it from the wind. The glow painted her fingers gold. For the first time that night, she could feel the ends of them again. She leaned closer, and the world shifted. The rough stone wall before her softened. The cold night air grew still. The light flame stretched and widened, becoming something larger than a match had any right to be. She saw a stove, a great iron stone with curved legs and polished brass knobs. Fire danced inside of it, lively and bright. The heat rolled toward her in waves. She lifted her feet, holding them toward the imaged warmth. The numbness eased. The ache softened. She smiled. Then the match sputtered. The flame shrank. The stove dissolved like breath on glass. She was back in the alley, the cold pressing in again. Only a charred stick remained between her fingers. She didn't cry. She'd known it wouldn't last. Her hand moved to the bundle again. Another match slid free, and she struck it. Light blossomed once more, brighter this time, as if encouraged by being born again. The wall melted away, and she found herself gazing into a room, and a table stood there, covered with a white cloth. Dishes gleamed. A roast goose sat in the center, steam rising in curling ribbons. She inhaled the scent of crisp skin, herbs, the warm bread wrapped around her like a blanket. The goose moved, not in a frightening way, but in a gentle, playful way, as if the world inside the flame obeyed different rules. It hopped down from the table and came towards her, proud and golden, offering itself as is to say, "You may eat. You may be full. You may rest." Her stomach ached with longing. Then the match burned down. Her vision folded in on itself. The alley returned, and the cold reasserted its claim. She held the blackened match and placed it carefully beside the first, as even burned-out things deserved respect. Her breathing had grown shallow. Snow rested on her hair and shoulders now. The blanket around her legs felt damp. Still, she lifted another match. Strike. Flame. This time, the light lifted upward, filling the space above her head. A tall Christmas tree appeared, grand and glowing. Candles shimmered on its branches. Paper stars spun slowly. Glass ornaments reflected tiny versions of herself. Dozens of small little girls wrapped in blankets, all staring up in wonder. She reached out one hand. Fingertips stretched towards the nearest flame. The tree shimmered. Candles rose higher. The branches stretched into darkness until the lights became stars. Real stars. And then one fell, drawing a bright silver line across the sky. Her grandmother's voice surfaced in her mind, gentle as ever. When a star falls, a soul is traveling. The girl's lips parted. She whispered the word she had not spoken aloud in many years. Grandmother? Another match waited between her fingers. She struck it. The flame flared brighter than before, steady and calm. In its glow, a familiar shape formed. A woman with kind eyes, warm hands, a shawl that smelled of bread and summer gardens. Her grandmother smiled. "There you are," she said. The girl leaned forward, and this time she did not feel cold at all. She felt arms around her, a familiar heartbeat, a presence that had never frightened her, never ignored her, never turned away. "Take me with you," the girl whispered. "Don't leave me in the cold." Her grandmother stroked her hair. "Come then, little one." The girl struck every remaining match at once. Light burst around her, soft and radiant. The alley vanished. The wind disappeared. There was only warmth, only brightness, only the feeling of being lifted and carried, held in the arms that did not tire. She closed her eyes and surrendered to the glow. The light around the girl softened, not brighter now, but gentler, like the glow that lingers from a candle when it's been blown out, when the world feels hushed and tender for just a moment. She no longer felt the cold stone beneath her, or the damp blanket against her knees, no longer heard the wind threading through the narrow alley. There was only warmth and arms around her, and the familiar scent of bread and herbs and something like sunshine on linen. Her grandmother held her close, rocking slightly, the way she used to when the girl was very small. "You're tired," the grandmother said softly. The girl nodded. She was so tired. Her bones felt light now, and the weight of hunger and cold had been set down at last. "Close your eyes," her grandmother whispered. "I've got you." The girl let her eyelids fall. Darkness did not frighten her here. It felt like velvet, like being wrapped in the inside of a night sky where no storms could reach. She felt motion, gentle and steady, as if she was being carried across a long distance without effort. No footsteps, no stumbling, no pain, only movement. She didn't know how much time had passed in this place. Time had no edges. She only knew that somewhere beneath the warmth, beneath the rocking, beneath the quiet, a faint new sound began to thread its way through. Not wind, not silence. Footsteps. Solid, human, and careful. Then there was a door opening, a rush of air, voices, muted at first, concerned and close. The warmth around her shifted. The arms that held her adjusted, lifted, and turned. She didn't open her eyes yet. She wasn't sure she needed to. She felt safe, and that was enough. Something soft was laid beneath her, a blanket, thicker than her own, dry and clean, heavy in a comforting way. A hand touched her forehead, another tucked the blanket around her shoulders. "She's so cold," a woman's voice said. "But she's breathing," a man replied. "Thank God." The girl's lips parted slightly. She drew in a deeper breath. Air filled her lungs, real air, sharp and clean and alive. The rocking returned, but different now. Not her grandmother's familiar sway. Another rhythm. Another body holding her. She drifted. Not upward now, but inward, towards sleep, towards rest, toward a place where waking might come. And somewhere inside that half-dream, she felt her grandmother's presence grow soft and distant, like a candle that had done its work and could now go out without the darkness returning. "You're not alone," the familiar voice whispered one last time. "You never were." The girl didn't answer. She didn't need to. Wrapped in blankets, carried in strong arms, sheltered from the wind, she let herself sink into warmth. And for the first time in her life, she fell asleep without the fear of the morning. The girl woke slowly, not all at once, but in small pieces. First the feeling of softness beneath her, then warmth pressing along the back and legs, then the faint crackle of fire, a scent that drifted through the air, wood smoke, bread, clean linen. She opened her eyes. Above her, a ceiling of smooth wooden boards, a simple lamp hanging from the beams, curtains stirring slightly where a draft slipped past the window. She turned her head. There it was, the hearth, a strong fire burning, a kettle steaming gently, a table nearby set with a bowl and a spoon and a cup, and beside the bed, a woman. Not her mother, not her grandmother, someone else, with kind eyes and soft hands folded in her lap, as if she'd been waiting a long time for this exact moment. The girl pushed herself up slowly. Her body felt heavy, but not painful, just tired in a way that promised healing. The woman leaned forward. "Oh, you're awake," she said. Her voice was warm, not loud, not careful in the way one speaks to fragile things, just natural. The girl's throat was dry. She swallowed. Where am I?" she asked. The woman smiled gently. "In our home. We found you in the cold last night. My husband carried you here." The girl tried to remember the alley. The snow, the matches, the light, the grandmother's arms. But the memories blurred together like paint and water. She looked down. A thick blanket covered her, clean and heavy, the kind of blanket that didn't just protect, but embraced. The woman lifted the cup from the bedside table. "Warm milk," she said. "Take your time." The girl accepted it with both hands. The ceramic was warm against her palms. She sipped. Sweetness spread across her tongue. But not much. But enough. She watched the woman carefully, looking for signs. Anger, judgment, or pity. But she found none. Only relief, and something else. Something the girl recognized. though she had rarely been on the receiving end of it. Care. A door opened and a man stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. He looked at the girl and smiled. "Oh, there you are," he said. "We were worried." No one had ever said that to her before. The girl set the cup down carefully. "I didn't sell any matches," she said quietly. The words came out before she could stop them. Habit, defense, explanation. The man frowned slightly. Not in disappointment, but confusion. "Well, you don't need to sell anything here," he said. "You need it to be warm, that's all." The girl blinked. No one had ever told her she didn't need to earn her place. The woman reached out and brushed a strand of hair from the girl's forehead just once, lightly, as though touching her was the most natural thing in the world. "You're safe," the woman said. "Rest. We'll talk when you're ready." The girl nodded. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. She lay back down, the blanket closing around her like a promise. The fire crackled. The kettle sang. And the house, which she had once watched from the cold outside, now held her gently within its walls. Morning came softly, not with bells or bright proclamations, but with the pale winter light creeping through the curtains. The girl felt it first on her eyelids, warm and gentle, and opened her eyes to a world that no longer smelled of damp straw and thin soup. The fire still burned in the hearth, though smaller now. The kettle rested quiet. A faint scent of bread drifted through the room. She sat up slowly. The blanket slid from her shoulders, thick and heavy and real. Not a patchwork of survival, but something made to last. Her feet touched the floor, wood smooth, warm from the fire. No frozen stones, no biting earth. She stood. Her body felt stiff, but not broken. Hungry, but not desperate. She wrapped the blanket around herself and stepped toward the door, uncertain, but curious. The house beyond was quiet. An empty quiet she knew from her old home. The quiet of people turned inward. No, this was different. Expectant. Peaceful. As though something kind was about to happen at any moment. She followed the scent of bread. And in the kitchen, the woman stood at the counter, cutting the thick slices of loaf. Butter waited nearby, softening in a small dish. A pot of porridge simmering on the stove, steam rising lazily. The woman turned when she saw her. "Good morning," she said. No one had ever said that to her before. The girl nodded shyly. The man sat at the table, polishing a cup with a cloth. When he saw her, he smiled. Not carefully, not sadly, just glad. "Come," he said. "Sit." She hesitated, then obeyed. The woman placed a bowl of porridge before her, a slice of bread, butter, a spoon, no half portions, no leftovers, a full serving. The girl stared at it for a moment. Her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. "You can eat," the woman said softly. "It's for you." The girl lifted the spoon. The porridge was warm and thick and sweetened with a little bit of honey. The bread soft inside, crust crackling faintly as she bit into it. Butter melted on her tongue. She ate slowly, not guarding the food, not hiding it, just eating. The couple watched her, not intrusively, not as if she were a problem to solve, but as if they were quietly grateful to see her there. After breakfast, the woman cleared the table and brought out a small wooden basin of warm water. "Would you like to wash?" she asked. The girl dipped her hands in. The water was warm enough to steam faintly. She washed carefully, watching the dirt swirl away. The woman handed her a cloth to dry, then another. "This one is yours," she said, "for your hair." The girl accepted it, surprised. Her hair had never had its own cloth before. Later, the man sat by the hearth carving something from a piece of soft wood. His knife moved with easy rhythm, shavings curling onto the floor like pale ribbons. The girl watched. "What are you making?" she asked. He turned the object in his hand. "A small stool," he said, "so you can sit near the fire without having to lean forward." The girl blinked. He was making something just for her. In her old house, repairs had been for chairs and walls, for objects, not people. The woman moved to the window and opened the curtains fully. Light spilled into the room. Dust motes danced in the beams like tiny stars. The girl found herself smiling. Not because someone told her to, not because she thought she could or should, but because something inside her, long folded inward, was slowly stretching open. At midday, the woman laughed. It was a small thing, just a brief sound when the man dropped a spoon and it clattered across the floor. But it was real laughter, unpracticed and light. The girl looked up startled. The man grinned sheepishly. The woman shook her head, still smiling. And the girl, without thinking, without planning, laughed too. A tiny sound, thin from disuse, but there. The woman paused. The man paused. They looked at the girl. Not with surprise, not with triumph, with something softer, like recognition, as if they had been waiting for that sound a long time. That evening, the fire burned low and steady. The girl sat on a small stool the man had carved for her. It fit her perfectly, as if it had been waiting all along. A blanket rested across her shoulders, not the old patchwork one that lay folded neatly nearby, but a thick quilt that carried the faint scent of lavender. The woman sat beside her, brushing her hair with slow, careful strokes, not to tidy her, just to be close. And the man tended the fire, nudging a log so sparks rose briefly, then settled again. For a long while, none of them spoke. There was no need to rush. Silence here felt safe. At last, the woman said, "Little one, where do you come from?" The brush moved gently through her hair, down, up, down again. The girl thought for a long time before answering. "There is a house," she said. "It leans in the wind." The woman waited. "A mother," the girl continued. "A father. They work very hard. They're always tired." "And do they care for you?" the man asked quietly. The girl nodded. "They feed me when there's food. They gave me a blanket. They let me sleep near the fire." The woman's hand did not stop brushing. "But," the woman said softly, "do they hold you?" The girl's throat tightened. She swallowed. "Not often," she said. "They have many worries. I learned not to add myself to them." No one gasped. No one sighed in pity. They simply listened. The man poked the fire once more. Sparks lifted and faded. "Did they send you to sell matches?" he asked. "Yes," the girl said, "so we can keep the roof." "Did you want to go home tonight?" the woman asked. The girl looked into the fire. She remembered the hearth and the leaning house, the thin soup, the quiet figures who never meant to harm her but never learned how to love her fully. She remembered the way her hope shrank each time she returned with empty hands. She lifted her eyes. "I want to visit," she said, "so they know I'm not lost." The woman nodded. "Of course." "But," the girl added, her voice smaller now, "I don't want to sleep there." The man's expression softened. Not surprised, not offended. "Where would you like to sleep?" he asked. The girl looked around the room. The fire, the quilt, the smell of bread, the gentle hands, the quiet laughter from earlier in the day. "Here," she whispered. The woman set the brush aside and turned the girl's face gently toward her. "Then here you will always have a place," she said. "Not only tonight, not only this winter. This house will know your footsteps." The man added, "You don't have to earn your warmth here. You already belong." The girl exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized how long she'd been holding her breath. The woman reached for the girl's small hand and pressed it between her own. "We have a house," she said, "but we have not had a child's voice in it. No small laughter, no stories by the fire. We've been lonely too." The girl blinked. They needed her. Not as a burden, not as a rescued thing, but as a missing piece. Her heart, which had grown so used to folding inward, stretched open just a little more. "I can tell stories," she said shyly, "about the shapes and the flames." The man smiled. "Then we will listen." The woman leaned forward and kissed the girl's forehead. A simple gesture, free, costless, the kind of love that had been missing for so long. "Tomorrow," the woman said, "we'll find a way to let your parents know you're safe. You may visit them whenever you wish. But this," she glanced around the room, "this is your home now, too." The girl nodded. No thunder, no ceremony, just truth setting gently into place. Outside, the wind brushed against the window panes. Inside, the fire glowed steady and warm. And in the small house that had once been quiet, 3 hearts beat in time, for the first time. In the days that followed, the house changed in ways so small they were almost invisible. And yet, everything was different. The girl learned the rhythm of the place, how the floor creaked near the hearth, which window let in the morning sun first, where the kettle liked to sit, where the bread rose best. She moved through the rooms carefully at first, like a guest, but the house did not treat her like one. It welcomed her footsteps, absorbed them, made space. The man showed her how to feed the fire, how to choose the right kindling, how to lay a log so that the flames could breathe. He never scolded if she made mistakes. He simply showed her again, patient as stone. The woman taught her how to knead dough, how to feel when it was ready, how to wait. They worked side by side, hands dusted in flour, the kitchen warm with rising bread and soft conversation. Sometimes they spoke, and sometimes they didn't. Both felt good. At night, the girl told stories. She sat on her little carved stool near the hearth, watching the flames, and the couple sat nearby, cups in hand, faces turned toward her, as though she were the only thing in the room worth seeing. "I see a ship," the girl would say, "with sails made of silver." Or, "Tonight's fire looks like a forest. There's a deer hiding behind the branch." Or, "That spark just now, that was a star going to visit someone who needs it." The man would nod. eyes warm. The woman would smile, chin resting in her palm, and the girl's voice grew stronger each evening, less careful, less small. Laughter came more often now, not loud or echoing, but gentle and frequent, like birds returning after a long winter. One afternoon, the man called the girl to the table. He held something small in his palm, a wooden key, not polished, not perfect, but carved with care. He tied it to the ribbon and placed it around her neck. "This," he said, "is your key." The girl looked at it. "What does it open?" she asked. The man smiled. "Nothing that needs locking, only what needs knowing. That this door is yours, that you never have to wonder where you belong." Her fingers closed around the key. It warmed quickly in her hand. Later that day, the woman brought out a small wooden box and set it on the mantel. "Do you remember your matches?" she asked. The girl nodded. She had told them everything: the selling, the cold, the alley, the flames, and her grandmother's voice. The woman never interrupted, only listened. The girl went over to her old bundle, which had been placed carefully in a drawer. Inside were the burned-out sticks, and one final match, unstruck, waiting. She carried it to the mantel and placed it inside the box. The woman closed the lid gently. "Not to forget," she said, "but to honor what brought you here." The girl looked at the small box, at the fire, at the room, at the people who now filled it. Her old life had not vanished. It had transformed, like wood into a flame, like cold into warmth. That night, the wind pressed against the windows again. Snow felt soft onto the roof. Winter still existed. Hardship still existed. Somewhere, her old house leaned into the dark. Somewhere, her parents wondered where the child had gone. And tomorrow, the couple would walk with her to that village. They would speak gently. They would tell her parents she was safe, that she could visit, that she was not lost. But tonight, none of that needed doing. Tonight, the girl lay in her bed beneath the thick quilt. The wooden key rested against her chest. The fire murmured in the hearth, and quiet voices drifted in the next room. The sound of two people who were no longer lonely. The house held them all, not as walls, not as shelter, but as a living thing, breathing warmth through every beam and board. And as the girl closed her eyes, she knew. Not with fear or wonder, but with simple certainty. She was home. You think briefly of all the nights that will come, of warm fires and softened light, of voices you know by heart, of love that shows itself, not in grand gestures, but in staying. The thought drifts through you, like warmth through stone. Breathe in, slow and deep. Breathe out, even slower. The world feels smaller now, in the best way, contained, held, as if the night itself has drawn a blanket close around you. Tomorrow will arrive when it's ready. The fire will be stirred. The door will open again. And whatever waits beyond the threshold, you will meet it with steadiness, with courage, and with a heart that knows where it belongs. For now, there's nothing to do. The story fades. The firelight fades. Thoughts loosen and drift like snowwakes crossing a quiet sky. You let go of the day, of the weight, of everything but warmth in your chest and the gentle rise and fall of your breath. Breathe in, hold. Breathe out. Let it all go. You're safe, and you are loved. You are home. And as the last light settles into darkness, sleep gathers you in. The night keeps watch. Your breath is slow and easy. Sleep now, dear one. You are safe, and you are loved. You have been listening to Nicki Woo Cozy Stories, written by Nicole T. Woodard. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep be deep.